Okay, it is 5 p.m. on Monday, December 19th, 2022. I'm calling to order the Education Operations Committee meeting. I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the last Educational Operations Committee meeting, November 28th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3. We had to move things around here so that we can have a presentation pertaining to our students that will be leaving for the Rose Bowl parade, along with, I believe, 7 or 8 other schools of students as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Perkins.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening. On the 2nd of January this next year, we're going to make a little bit of history. We are part of the first all-area marching band made up of multiple school districts. The LA Unified School District has an honors band that's made up of multiple schools, but we're the first time it's been done with multiple school districts. So we're going to take, we have about 425 students between the 8 schools, and we are looking forward to flying out of Chicago on the 28th and making a little history. To give you a little bit of history about how this all came about, the president of this year's Rose Parade is a Northland Pines alum, Amy Wainscott. And she reached out after she was elected and said, I want representation from my home area. To date, there has never been a school sending a marching band from outside of suburban southern Wisconsin. So she wanted to make this something special from our area. The directors at Pines, Lakeland, and Three Lakes started collaborating. They cast a wider net to the Great Northern. Those people started reaching out to friends and acquaintances. And so the final 8 ended up being Pines, Lakeland, Three Lakes, Anago, Everest, Merrill, Mosinee, and us. And we are very excited to be able to go. We did a test run of this last year on June 30th. We got together last year. We ran a rehearsal together, realized we could work together, and we did 5 parades on July 4th, and that was a hike and a lot of fun. Last May, Amy Wainscott visited Wausau East, had a presentation for us, met with our seniors. We played for her. It was a great time. Amy is absolutely delightful and really, really excited about this. She was up for the 4th of July this year. We've been in touch as we've done some fundraising, and she's absolutely fun to work with. We'll formally be a part of her unit as the president, or the Rose Parade President's Unit, and I think we're in the front third of the parade route. So for you guys, tune in at 10 o'clock. It's an early morning for us. We did a lot of fundraising last summer. A huge thank you to the Wausau Woodchucks because they've done a lot to support us. It costs $2,500 per student for everything but their lunch each day, and that also includes their air flight, their hotel stay, breakfast and dinner. And if you look in your packets, there's some interesting dinner opportunities for those students as well. We started rehearsing. We put 3 rehearsals together in June. The last one we hosted, and at Wausau East, that was the big kickoff with Amy Wainscott and with a lot of our administration, both at the district level and at the school levels for everybody. And then we've done one Sunday a month since. There's a really awesome photo from the gigantic field house at Northland Pines there of our Band Fest formation. The 4th of July circuit provided 2 opportunities for us. One, it gave us a chance to test run this to see what we could, what was working well, what we could do better, listen to how the music worked, gel as a group. It also is paying for our semi to get our equipment out there. So the Merrill Marching Blue Jays semi leaves on Christmas Day and is traveling cross country at the cost of about $12,000. And that was fundraised from these parades last summer. And that is paid for. That doesn't come out of the student pocketbook, or that doesn't come from us. That's completely paid for by donations on that day from people along the route and people in the various communities. Inside your packets, I have the agenda or the itinerary for where we're going to, what we're going to do. Just some highlights for you. We will get to see the float barn. we will get to tour Huntington Beach and Pacific City. We have a number of rehearsals and a number of working breakfasts for directors. We'll see the Griffith Observatory and Park. We will be part of Band Fest, which is a huge celebration of all the Tournament of Roses bands at Pasadena City College. We'll be out on the field playing some music along with our parade tune. There is a trip to Santa Monica. There's a trip to Hollywood and Highland, a foot tour or a bus tour of the city. We also get to spend a great deal of time at Universal Studios. We are on winter break, so not everything needs to be, math. Anyway, I'm sorry. And then following our parade performance, we have Disneyland California Adventure Park all to ourselves. There's one other group that will be out there. It's a band from Pella, Iowa, and us, and they're both Bob Rogers clients. So we'll have the place to ourselves, and then we come home on Tuesday, January 3rd. So the uniform for this project, the Tournament of Roses requires that everybody have common headwear. So this is Jack Lynch. He's a tenor player for us. He has the full uniform on, which will be our uniform, plus we have a specialized wrap for all the hats, all the shakos, and then a common plume, which you can see in the photo. We commissioned Mike Leckrone, the former director of the UW Marching Band, to write something that would be recognizable and to everybody and still celebrate us. It was really a fascinating process because of the 8 directors, I'm the only one who marched for Mike, and he still writes by hand. And so translating some of his hand into something legible was an interesting journey for all of us. As we put things into the notation software, sometimes the notation software didn't like everything we were putting in there, so there were some opportunities to learn some strange things like double flats and strange naturals and talk a little bit about jazz harmony, because Mike is an old big band jazzer. He writes things very, very specifically. So we're also able to talk about the Wisconsin band sound and why it sounds the way it does, why Mike writes the way he does. So it was a lot of fun, but it's America the Beautiful and on Wisconsin. If you've seen us perform in any parades, either in town or over in Athens, or saw any of the Northwoods band, you will have heard the piece. We're very happy with it. He really did a nice job of getting that Wisconsin sound, but also making it accessible for our students. And then at the Band Fest celebration, the band directors from Mosinee and Anago put together one page of drill for us, and we're playing. And I don't understand how Shake a Tail Feather fits in. You'll have to ask Mr. Finnegan at Everest that. But things that celebrate the theme of turning the corner. So Shake a Tail Feather, Thinkin' I Can't Turn You Loose, which are popular from the Blues Brothers. And we really kind of like the Turn the Beat Around, the Gloria Estefan chart that we've got in the book. So that's the performance end of it. The parade is 5.5 miles long. You play from the moment you step off till the moment you're done. And after we get through TV turn and get about 2 miles in, then we'll be sectioned into groups. All of our students have a number, so 1, 2, 3, and then we have a cadence. But for that first 2 miles, where there is any possibility of us being on any of the various television stations, everybody plays every step. There are aid stations along the way. We do have a couple of students with some physical needs, and they know how to use those aid stations and will be reunited with us, although they plan to charge full 100%, and I don't blame them. So that will be the parade on January 2nd. For anybody who's curious, because it's on January 1st is on a Sunday. The NFL gets that day, so they move everything to January 2nd. So there you have it. Remo does custom drum heads for this parade. They donate all of them, and so we had a little head-changing party Friday night after pep band. Those are our one set of our quads and a couple of our bass drums. And then when we're finished, we'll pop those heads off, and the drummers will get a head to commemorate the experience, and to keep all of our students will get to keep their hat wrap and their plume as a commemorative item of for the performance. So we have 45 students from Wausau East from our band. 43 of those are East High students. 2 are actually Wave students who take band with us. And we're very excited to represent the school district. We're very excited to represent the city and the state. And we're super grateful to everybody who's been a part of this process because as they say, it takes a village. And it really did to make this happen with all of our building administrators. And they've been absolutely spectacular, as well as folks at central office who oversee these things. This has just been a terrific experience for us. And I don't think it could have gone more smoothly from my perspective as a teacher in the district. So thank you all very much for your support. And to those people who are here or listening in, thank you for your support.
Appreciate it. Any comments or thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about it in the media, but this would be obviously, I'm sure this is high on the list of something that we want to promote a lot, at least in the few days leading up to it. I mean, this is something that we should use all of our means to get the word out, for sure.
This is huge, and to have 8 schools coming together musically to do this is tremendous. I appreciate your efforts behind that. Also, I would say our students wouldn't have this opportunity if we didn't have something this big to put out there. And when you talk about the 43 students that you're taking from Wausau East, they're going to have a thrill of their life to be a part of something huge like this. So I'm saying huge and big, and the idea of the opportunities because of the fact our individual bands would never have been able to go out to the Rose Bowl.
No, and this, we just don't have the size in this part of the state to be able to put that together. It's the Milwaukee suburb schools that have represented before. So this has been, we were hoping for 250, and as students started signing up and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, we started getting emails from the travel company, are you sure you want to continue to allow this? And we crossed 400 and we were super excited. So we really doubled what our hopes and expectations were for this process. But the camaraderie, the opportunity to build relationships, and between the 8 bands, there's about 5 different marching systems in place, and this has been somewhat Frankenstein's monster, but it's also given kids another opportunity to see this is how this school does this, this is how this school does this, and they come out of different systems. I think these 45 students are going to be well positioned to be prepared to march at any of our R3 schools in the state, to march for Madison or to go out of state and be able to march in other programs when they graduate from high school. So this has been a great collaborative effort, and the other directors have just been a treat to work with.
Well, and with that, thank you as a director here at Wausau East. Thank the other directors for coming up with the idea, and go get them. I watch that parade every year, so I'm going to be looking for it this year even more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy that. Thank you.
That's exciting. I'm going to go to our next agenda item. We don't need to go to that agenda item. No one is on the docket to speak to us this evening. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, and I'm going to be passing it over to Dr. Hiltz. The board will continue exploring options related to the restructuring.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. So obviously we had a short turnaround from last week's meeting, but we got a little bit of work done. So we'll review that tonight and see where the board wants to go. Can you advance, Cassie? We always start with our why: improve service by improving more efficient use of our resources. I think we've been through that. Tonight we decided that we should give a little peek into the website feedback. We have that open survey, and we cannot respond to folks because we want them to be able to respond anonymously. So we thought we would take an opportunity tonight to share with you and share with some folks who might be watching. Review again a little bit about those measurable benefits, answer some of the board questions from last week. Again, we just got to a few of those high school scenarios, and then just ask for some more direction. So that's what we'll get through hopefully in the next 20 minutes or so, maybe a little less. So you can see this is a demographic of who's responding. Roughly half are parents. Then the other thirds are staff, or a combination of staff and parents, or just community members. Many of the questions are those that we've heard before, right? What about transportation? Which schools? How, all that. So I'm just going to encourage people to go on the website, look on that FAQ. Diana's done a nice job as we take feedback, we create new FAQs all the time, so it's always growing. So please go on and look at that. But if you go forward, Cassie, there's a few that I thought were unique and could spark some good conversation. One question: can we create a separate 4K building? As you know, we currently have 4 4K academies. Not sure the context of the question. This was the question, but we can. Matter of fact, as we're exploring possible mergers of elementaries, this could really help us with school capacity. So this is something we're looking at. I think we've spoken recently about the possibility of state funding for full day 4K. Our current 4K academies would not have the capacity to support that, so we would have to make this structure to support that, which would be wonderful anyway. So we can, and we are actually exploring that option. Next question: how will we combine high school sports? It was asked several times, so I just thought I'd bring it up here. If we have one high school, we would have one. We're only allowed to have one varsity team, right? One for boys, one for girls, and so that's what would happen there. And we think we can expand into some WIA sports and also create intramurals. So there's a number of ways that we could do that. But just so people know, we could only have one high school team in each sport. Somebody asked why we haven't considered closing Hawthorne Hills. It's a relatively new school. I know it's in a unique placement, but it is very new. So I don't think we would be closing that, but we could explore that if the board's interested. Someone was asking, isn't it a benefit for us to have 2 different high schools? Because you have different course offerings, different schedules. And I thought about that, and I guess if people chose their school based on the program, I'd be more interested in that perspective. And we have a few that shift for sports, but really, for the most part, people attend the school where they reside, and so I don't think it's really, to have different experiences really isn't a benefit. I think it's a forced choice for the most part. So I don't know if people have a reaction to that. Let me pause. I went through those first 4 rather quickly. Questions or thoughts on those first 4? Or I'll keep going. Okay. In an 8-9 model, how will freshmen experience different high school events like homecoming? There's going to be a team that's going to look at traditions and cultures and those kinds of things. Don't know yet, but partly one of the benefits we've heard from having freshmen not in those in a 9-12 high school is that keeping them younger for a while. There's some things that maybe we don't want 14-year-olds to see. So I don't know. But that's something we are very interested in making sure that kids have a really exciting quality experience. So that's something we would definitely, those kinds of questions we will definitely be asking, and certainly engage, we could engage students in that, and certainly teachers and principals as well. Somebody asked if we could raise John Marshall, build a new school. Maybe. We know we've got some restrictions now, or requirements maybe is a better word, so we'd have to work with the city and the planning commission on any kind of effort like that. Current tech ed facilities, I don't know if they're talking specifically about autos, but we know that is a topic of interest. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we've got some thoughts on it, and if we go down that road, we know we're going to use all of our tech ed facilities. We have incredible tech ed facilities, so we will use them. It's just a question of how to best leverage them. A couple of questions about, I merged a few questions here. Basically, how does the referendum and consolidation work together? And just so people know, if the board chooses to close some schools and merge and we don't need investments, we can reapply those to other projects. And maybe that's the shortest answer to that question. We are able to reassign though, reapply, or reapply to other projects within the same goal, right? Facilities. We couldn't apply it for something outside of the scope of the referendum, but certainly there's plenty of work to do within that scope. And then somebody asked about streaming classes, and we do that now. It's certainly not the same experience as being in person, especially in those hands-on classes, which are some of those that are of most interest. So those are some of the questions. Any reactions or thoughts on those?
Keith, I think just the one regarding John Marshall, I mean, our ability to raise it
Yeah.
and build a new school, the chances of that are zero, right? Just given the actions that the city has recently taken.
We could, as I understand it, and Bob, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think we could remove large segments of John Marshall and possibly build onto some the portions that are of historic interest. The hard part about that is now you can't have a school for a year, where normally, you could build on the other site and leave that school operational. So, I don't know, would you add anything to that, or Larry?
No, just that the city would have to give us a permit
Yeah.
to raise it. So
Yes.
anything we do would have to go through them,
Yes.
But it-
including raising it entirely. They might go along with it if there was enough public sentiment.
That would be a significant change given, the meetings I watched, one of the main reasons they voted to make it a historical landmark was to prevent it from being torn down and a new school built. But you're right, things could change, but that would be a significant change.
But it doesn't prevent us, just so everybody's clear, it doesn't prevent us from closing it.
Correct.
So then we could sell it, do it, whatever.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting one thing or the other. I just want it to be clear to people that because of those actions, our hands are much more tied than they would have been. So-
That is true, yes. Anything else on those? All right, Cassie, you want to go ahead? We asked a few different questions on the website. What excites you? And no surprises here. These are the same things that excite us, right? Increased opportunities, level playing field for kids, bringing the community together. Childcare continues to be of significant interest to staff and community. Decreasing our costs, so nothing really surprising here, but it's good that people are recognizing the opportunities. The next one is concerns. Property values, ability to walk to school. Number 3, we've heard this one quite a bit in different formats. People buy homes, or they choose where they live based on the school, and then we're going to change it. Possibly, because frankly, if we didn't change based on that argument, we would never move a boundary, would never close a school, we'd never add a school. So I understand the sentiment, but we really can't make a decision based on that. People have been concerned about combining poor schools, as they put it, together, and having need and enhancing that need. But frankly, we're also enhancing our resources and the ability to serve these students with our highly skilled people in a more efficient system, or in a more efficient setting, I should say. That's actually one of the things that we're excited about, is the ability to pool our resources. Concerns about more families leaving the district. Yep, they might. They're concerned about closing my school. And would we get rid of the flex mod schedule? That was a direct question. I don't think so, but I don't have an answer. We would have a team that would look at that. So, was that the last one on those? Okay, thank you. Questions Lance?
Just one thing on number 4 of combining poor schools together, and I know tonight's not an elementary night, but that was something that was addressed in the elementary subcommittee meetings this summer too, and a lot of it has to do with AGR funding. And actually, there's some reason to want to keep AGR schools together to maintain that AGR funding, because that's what allows the smaller class sizes, and same thing with title funding. That's what allows us to have extra resources through Title I. So there's actually a lot of advantage in keeping those schools qualifying for those 2 funding sources.
Yeah, title in particular. AGR, we have a little more flexibility, but you're right. We definitely don't want to jeopardize the funding.
Can we explain just a little bit more about combining poor schools? What does that mean, poor school?
Well, and this was language from the survey. What I've heard in person is, if we take 2 city schools where we have a higher poverty level, does that further disadvantage any students in a school like that? That's what I think they're asking.
because I just have a problem with the terminology. I mean, poor is very ambiguous.
Yes.
And it could mean a lot of different things, and I don't want the wrong impression. If you're talking about poor, when you're talking about economics or
Right.
things of that fashion, I think that should be talked about, because I don't believe we have poor schools.
Correct. Thank you for catching that. Because I had context around it, I didn't even make that connection, but you're right. This is not about the quality of the school, right? This is about higher levels of poverty in schools is what we're talking about, what they're concerned about. Thank you. It's a good catch.
And the reason I brought up the subcommittee meetings is because we talked about that is an advantage or a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Would it be an advantage to take a school with, a higher poverty, combine it with a school with less poverty, combine them together, so now the school quote unquote isn't as poor? And what we talked about is, but the students from poverty are now in this school, but they don't have the funding now. This school no longer has the funding for the smaller class sizes and the title support. So we kind of looked at it as that would be a disadvantage to the students of poverty, because they would lose that support if we caused their school to no longer qualify for AGR or Title I.
The only other thing I would add, Keith, is that if the board is presented with a proposal that we decide to move forward with, I think we should learn more about number 5, where we could give parents some specifics. If this happens, what would you do? So we have a realistic idea on what the impact of that could be.
Yeah, we've been thinking about, you asked that question last week and it comes up a little. Actually, would you go forward one, Cassie? Oh, this isn't it. Can I come back to that for a sec? Because I have some of your questions on here, and you probably saw it, but because actually I'm just going to zip through this. These are some of the things we're really excited about in our outcomes. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, I think, Karen, it was you that talked about the possibility to add elementary athletics. So I just added that to the list. So we haven't done any additional work on this, but we certainly want to keep these possible outcomes in front of people, because this is really the reason we're interested in doing this work at all. So we added that. I think on the next,
Can I interrupt
I'm
you
sorry.
just for a second?
Yes.
To play off of that, I wasn't able to say anything at the last meeting because of the delay. But the bottom line is, people should be aware of the fact that in 2010, Act 10, when it came in, if I'm not mistaken, we basically, because of savings, and you can speak to this more specifically, Lance, because you were here, elementary athletics basically went away. And that was a deterrent to many of our co-curricular coaches, because of the fact that they weren't having athletics at the elementary level, students being involved as what they were years ago. And I remember specifically my sons and daughters were very involved with the elementary programs starting at third grade, second, third grade coming up. So that took place because of Act 10, if I'm not mistaken.
And the loss of revenue, yes.
The loss of revenue. Okay. So if this is going to be saving us revenue by wherever, we can start going back and coaching our kids up at a lower level.
Perhaps, yeah, that would be, there will be a lot of,
Possibility.
yeah, absolutely, it is a possibility. There will be a lot of, decisions to be made about how we would reinvest our resources, right? And this is certainly one attractive one. Sorry about the print on this. These were, and if someone asked a question that didn't get added to this list, please let me know. This is what I had captured during the conversation. But so let's just talk about that really quickly. Number 1, elementary athletics. Could we add that? So, and I guess the answer is yes. And if we have savings that we experience, I think an important thing will be to decide where are our top priorities? Where do we reinvest that? So yes, we can, and those late buses and all those really family friendly supports would be wonderful to reinstate. There was a question about East and the ability to build on it. Yes, it's a swamp, and so there are a lot of areas on that campus where we cannot build. Also a lot of woods, of course.
Don't we have, from an expansion standpoint, wasn't East set up originally to expand on both of the academic wings?
I don't
I
know.
can't say it was designed for that, but we did create a design.
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah,
it's
we've got it
perfect
coming up.
like some of our other
I
schools,
just
but-
received feedback, someone had spoke to Brad Peck, and he said, yeah, absolutely, it was set up for expansion, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll take a look at that concept map in a few minutes here.
Wouldn't be a surprise, because that was sort of the same time frame as Stettin and South, which were set up that way. Before we go on, you had
Yeah.
mentioned on number one, what could we do with some of the savings? You mentioned activities buses. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the negatives that we've heard about some of the things we've discussed are having students in multiple schools, and how do I get to, what if I have a child at junior high and high school, and how do I get all of them? And some people say, well, just take the bus, but usually that question comes from people who have after-school activities. That's the reason they're not taking the bus, because we don't have an after-school activity bus like we used to. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that would help with that issue of having children in multiple schools. It wouldn't solve all the issues related to that, but one of the big issues would be solved if we actually had activities buses again.
Yeah.
When did activity buses basically go away?
Before I was here, so I don't know,
Really?
maybe Kevin Gooding knows, or Julie Shell, or somebody that's been around a little longer.
So a while
Be
ago.
careful how you say that, Bob.
True story, you tell me that all the time, that you've been here longer than me.
Not you, that's what they've done.
That's why I
Get
spoke.
me out of this.
Yeah, right. They probably went away, I think at that time I was principal at Lincoln, so maybe about 10 years ago, John, would you say? Or we just did intramurals in schools. And the buses, the inter-school games, sometime my tenure at Lincoln or early, so maybe 10, 12?
10, 12, probably closer to 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a while ago.
Yeah.
So that's something that would be a positive to bring back, because we haven't had it in a long time. And most districts do have activity buses that pick students up that are involved with co-curriculars. And for us not to be able to do that, I think that has to be talked about as well, because everybody's asking about transportation, things that we can do.
Yeah, transportation's a hot topic. Another similar kind of question, how would we determine what people value that we need to make sure we keep through this? And I'm not sure, we could certainly do a survey. It would be interesting to see what kinds of responses we would get. So if people have ideas on a good way to, we thought about, do we already have some of that from some of our, like our WIP study, Life After High School, or MRAs, or Measurable Results Assessment through Leader and Me.
I would highly suggest something of this magnitude that you ask parents directly.
Yeah.
Just
survey or-
and again, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, once you land on a proposal, if we get there, if this happens, right, here's the things that we're gonna do. What do you value? What you would be thinking of to keep?
Good, thank you. So that'd be once we have a proposal, say it's something concrete, that's something we've heard at all of our PTOs. What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? And we don't have it yet. So we, okay, I understand what you're saying, thank you. Does a flex mod impact West capacity? We talked first about it being open campus, and then when we talked to our friends from Nexus, they said they've already worked that in, because it does tend to increase capacity. A flex schedule does increase capacity. And if you look at capacity in square footage, West actually has a little more capacity with a little less or similar square footage. So yes, it does have a slight impact.
Yeah, the reason, that was my question, the reason I asked that is we're talking about which site would be better for a senior high, and one of the nods towards West was having an extra 110 capacity, and I just wondered, well, how much of that is assuming that the flex mod stays, or assuming that you couldn't do the flex mod at East,
Right.
because maybe East capacity changes if you could do the flex mod there, or maybe West capacity goes down if we decide not to do the flex mod there.
Yeah, and it would. And of course, and if somebody knows better than me, the differences, but West was built to support the flex mod by having large lecture halls and smaller classrooms. And so if you try to do a traditional schedule at West, your classrooms really aren't big enough to support that kind of structure, and the same would be true over at East. It was built with larger classrooms. It doesn't really have, it has one large group room, and so it's really not set up to do the flex mod. Matter of fact, a little later when we talk about that high school option, I wouldn't mind hearing from the board. Is the flex mod schedule our preferred schedule for our upper level high school students? Because if so, that gives us another piece of information as to what our options might be.
The other thing to keep in mind is through the consolidation and potential referendum savings that could be reapplied, some capacity questions could be solved at Wausau West through some of those reappropriated funds.
Possibly, we'd have to see what would be available, but yes. Quantify course offerings, we didn't get to that. Define right sizing. It is about maximizing resources, but didn't really speak to that. There's a list of some WIAA sports we could add. When asked about intramural sports, really want to get some feedback from students, but there are some examples down there under A, some of those silent sports or fishing clubs and trap shooting and all sorts of different things that we could add in that respect. So those are some of the answers. We'll continue to work on those as we move forward. And if you have more, please send them. Anything else on that?
I'm just gonna make one comment, and it kind of goes towards Larry. Having been in two high schools that closed down rooms based on mod scheduling before, the cost factor of that is immense. Plus the fact that your HVAC then has to be redone because your airflow is going to be different in an open classroom versus a non-open classroom. So the mod scheduling, you keep on saying that, West was built for mod scheduling, for that capability of having the mod, the group, and then big group, opening up walls and things of that fashion. I'd hate to think of the cost that it would be if we said no more mod and we're going to go and redo the interior of Wausau West. Am I off on that, Bob, or?
Pardon me, you're not off, but the short answer is it depends. Without seeing the specific plan and knowing how we're modifying the room or the use of the room, it's hard to say how we would need to modify the HVAC to accommodate that size or use. But in all likelihood, there would need to be some modifications of some form or another.
Okay, just another food for thought when you're talking about eliminating a scheduling system that was built for, the building was built for.
Mm-hmm.
I have an additional question. I don't know if this is the time to ask
Sure.
it, but I've been receiving some feedback from some parents asking this same question, so I just feel like I need to bring it, and maybe you guys need time to respond to it. But the question is, can we do this in stages? And so some of the proposals really impact every single building all at once. And I guess there's maybe some caution, concern over impacting every single building simultaneously in a district and trying to do any one of it with excellence. And I feel that same sense. And so my question is it possible, if you were to bring, some proposals to us where we could say, okay, first we're gonna look at elementary, then we're gonna look at secondary, or vice versa, so that we can really, with excellence, address kind of some of the bumps that are inevitable when we make a change like this. With, if we start with high schools, dealing with, okay, now we've got to deal with all the scheduling, all the sports things, all of those details, or if we go you know, at the elementary level, and we wanna say, now we've got these open buildings and we can deal with a 4K academy. We can provide one building and focus on the daycare piece. But to try and do that all at once feels a little overwhelming. So I'm receiving that question a lot, and so I'm just wondering if that is if the proposal of the 8, 9, 10 through 12, which is the one that would potentially impact everybody all at once, what that plan is.
So let's answer that first by going back to our why. In order to improve service, we have to really free up resources, right? And so as we're getting more into possible moves, so if we use the 8, 9, 10, 12, scenario A as an example. So if we create an 8, 9, 10, 12, and we pull 8th grade out of the middle schools, we could potentially leave middle schools with 6 and 7 for a year or something, right? And then in the next stage, we could move 5th grade into the middle schools. And then the third phase could be merging the elementaries. The hard part about doing it in stages is that the staffing we would need for the 5th grade, for instance, likely comes out of the elementaries. How do we make them available? We don't get the benefit of the economies of scale if we don't do this simultaneously. And things like, for instance, if we merge schools, if we want to do them as whole schools, we almost have to pull 5th grade out for capacity reasons. So potentially we could. It would probably work better to do it all at once, actually. I know it feels overwhelming, but it might be best to do it that way.
Can you tell me, if we removed the 4Ks and made one 4K academy building, would we be able to keep 5th grade and have those full schools and staffs move into those buildings like we would had we moved 5th?
I don't think so. What we've been exploring, and I'll look at Julie, because she and the principals have been working on these questions. As I understand it, we would probably need to remove 5th grade and the 4Ks. There are some schools where it would work to leave the 4K academies in, and it might be beneficial, but I think we almost need to do both in order to move them as whole schools. Am I right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't shared a lot of details about the planning because we're still working on it, but some more things are becoming evident as we continue to work on what's possible and what's not, or what's more of a challenge.
Thank you.
I think we would also, if we did need to add any capacity at one of the secondaries, one of either the senior high or the junior high, the senior high, I guess. It'd be very hard to do that while at the same time leaving open space in the middle schools and not getting any savings from closing an elementary building. I think that would be tricky. To try to justify that economically, to have those open spaces, because there'd be a lot of open space in the 2 middle school buildings if it was just 2 grades.
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily long term, like it would only be for a season while this was sort of perfected.
Yeah. No, I've had the same question. I've had both. I've had the question that you had, and I've also had people say, "What's taking you so long?" So I've had, I've gotten it both ways, which isn't uncommon as a board member. So
yes, we are. People are have all sorts of ideas and concerns, and Can you move that forward? Thank you. So just a reminder for the board and people who are watching, we're talking about various decisions that the board would need to make. We're talking right now about high school, as Lance alluded to earlier. Can you advance that, Jen? So I thought this would be an interesting time to share a short history of the high schools here. I learned a little bit. So first high school in Wausau, 1889. Pretty quickly later, replaced with a larger school. Then the new high school, the one on the left, built in that was the old one. 1936, we built the one in the middle, which is the old east. And people have been asking me, why did they build another high school? Why were all these decisions made? And what I learned is that they were experiencing some overcrowding, and then the state required that districts integrate. So I was trying to picture, a school board like this, back in the mid-50s, your schools are crowded, the state's forcing you to integrate. Would it be logical to build a second high school? I could see that as a logical, it's interesting to me what conversations they had and before they made these changes. So then they built the second high school on the west side, that opened in 1970. They renamed Wausau High School as East, and then the new high school was called Wausau West. One more slide, Jen, and then those are the two. So high school was, the high school was there till the 70s, or 1970, and then up in 04, then we built the new Wausau East. So to me, what it said, this district has been evolving ever since its inception, right? Traditions have come, they've gone, they've been replaced. And we're just at another juncture in the life cycle of this community in this school district.
Can I ask a history question as well? Maybe you don't know the answer to this, but
Let's see.
I really enjoyed learning all of this. And one other question I have, and I have gotten from a lot of people, and it wasn't too distant history, is why was the location of Wausau East chosen for the new building in 2004 or previous to that when they decided to build there, in light of, did they not look at what was happening with new construction, or did they not foresee that there's really the access comparatively is really lacking?
I don't have an answer. I don't know if I'm looking around here who
I don't think anybody needs to be thrown under the bus. I just get that question all the time.
I've not found any answers to that.
Okay.
Anything, Bob or Larry, have you heard anything?
I think you're right, Karen. The demographic studies would have been available at that time, and I think I've talked to people in this community that have been here a long time, and it's hindsight, right? And we can't change the fact that Wausau East was built, and so that's the crux of this problem. How do we utilize the resources through hard trends like declining enrollment, labor participation rates, all of these things? How do we use the best of our resources? Well, sell East. Well, that doesn't make sense. You'd get pennies on the dollar for it, right? We'll build a brand new high school that's more centrally located, or add on massively to Wausau West. Okay, let's put a referendum out there for another $50 to $100 million. I'm pretty sure that that's not going to go over very well. So, given the resources and the facilities footprint that we have, what is the smartest solution to achieve, the goals that we're trying to achieve here, which is educational and operational efficiencies, and improve service. So if nothing is done, the same thing that is going on right now in this district will continue to take place. And that's not the answer. So I think the changes that we're talking about, although are many, I'm excited about the opportunity that it puts this district in for strategic focus for our families, for our students, for the staff. I know there will be some pain and some growing pains and some things that we'll, have to overcome, like transportation. But those are things that I think are, could be short-term and can be solved. So,
yeah, thank you.
I think, Dr. Hills, your comments to begin with this session, I think is a very big point. Change. 1889 to 1970 to 2022, change happens. And we're in a tough situation where we have to start making some decisions because change has taken place. When you think about the D.C. Everest district was a part of the Wausau School District. They broke away, changed, that was uproar. Two schools split, that wow, uproar. I think Win Brockmeyer's probably still turning over in his grave. The fact that this all happened, and he saw it happen in his last few years of coaching. So bottom line is, we're in a position where we need to explore these possibilities, the decline in demographics, the decline in population. We have to make some tough decisions. And unfortunately, when change takes place, everyone's not going to be happy. But we have to be concerned about what we are going to do for the families and the students of the future of the Wausau School District. Not what's happened. We got to learn from it, but we have to make some tough decisions to move forward for our families and our community, the taxpayer. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, but we're ready. So thank you.
Thank you.
Having had kids that graduated from the old Wausau East and remembering the temporary classrooms and many of the problems that they'd had, they'd tried fixing things with the cafeteria and expanding things. But the thing that struck me was when I went to West and saw temporary facilities there that had been there for a length of time, the similarities that we're still facing now, and how important it is for us to be making these decisions now rather than continuing to put them off and put them off and put them off. So I'm excited about what we're starting to see and looking forward to it.
Thank you. All right, let's continue. So last meeting, we ended with this question to the board. So if you go to the next slide, Jen. And the board said, we don't want to consider those three. Let's look at a 9-12 at the East Campus, and then the 8, 9, 10, 12. So if you move forward, did some work on this model here. So next slide. This is the East footprint. Next, what we asked next, okay, if East were to serve as a 9-12 high school, what would we need to do? So we would need approximately 200,000 more square feet. That includes the color of the text corresponds to the color on the map. So on the upper right is a Tech Ed edition. And Bob, thank you for reminding me. In that text, it says a one-story addition for Tech Ed. Auto would have west-only access. That is the direction west, not Wausau West. Okay, because I didn't catch that, and Bob's like, that could tell. Okay, so we were clear. It's just a direction. On the left side, the green, that's a two-story addition. I think that's 88,000 square feet. That's general classroom space. The lower right is arts and music addition, and then one more gym added on the front left. So they just did, again, this is, a fancy napkin drawing is what they called it. 200,000 square feet, roughly $110 million. That's just for the building. That's no renovation inside. And we asked, I said, does it really need to be that big? And so they did some comparisons to other large schools. And so, for instance, in this rendition right here, with our 1,600 or 1,700 students, we would have 234 square feet per student. In a comparison of other similar, actually I've got it here. In a comparison of other similar sized high schools, like Middleton, Beloit, Spash, a couple of Kenosha's and a Madison West, the average was 220. So they're a little above average, but they're right in the ballpark for square footage. So this is not excessive. So that's kind of what would have to happen to house 912.
What is the square footage today?
I think you got it in that email, don't you?
I'm not gonna just throw a random number out
Yeah.
there without having an accurate one, but East is 343 square feet.
343,000, yeah. So roughly 500, I think
And
that's.
the capacity is what again?
1484.
So 1,500 capacity and it's 330,000 square feet? Is that what you said, 330?
43,402 square feet. capacity 1,484.
And the capacity that we would need in a 9 through 12 scenario peaks at what again? I think it was in 24, 25.
I don't have it in front of me, but currently we're 1437 at west, and we are 902 at east, so 2,500 probably.
Plus,
If it goes up a little bit.
plus EEA as well, right? Got that.
All kinds of empty schools for EEA.
Not for the high school kids.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So again, this was just a few days of consideration. If you go to the next slide, Jen. So I think we began with an assumption that a 912 would be preferable to a separate campus. And so just thinking about if that's true, frankly, we think we'd probably get the same outcomes. We could improve student academic and co-curricular experiences. We would get some program cost savings that we could reinvest. We would not be duplicating services, so we could hopefully expand our programs. So we could do the same things. There would be a cost savings, again, because of that, we would stop duplicating our efforts. But certainly that 110 million plus whatever happens to the campus, plus renovations, and we're probably looking at I don't know, something more than 110 million. So I wonder, and let me say too, we've, as we continue to explore this, we learned about a district, Oak Creek Franklin, that has a freshman center. They were experiencing challenges with their freshmen being successful in school, so they actually created a separate school back in 2017 just for freshmen. Anecdotally, they're having initial good reaction to it. Now, of course, you throw a pandemic in the middle of it, and they don't have any trend data that's relevant. But we have a meeting with them to talk about a little more detail on what that's about. So I don't know if a 912 is inherently better than a split campus. And with that cost, I don't know if that's something the board wants to pursue.
As like I said earlier, I really don't think the public has an appetite for another $100-some million to pursue this. If we could start all over again, I think we know a singular high school, given the enrollment trends at this point in time, would make the most sense, but we can't. So if we go put a referendum out there for $100 million that doesn't pass and we can't go down this path, what sense does it make? So utilizing the resources that we have and the facilities footprint that we have, that taxpayers have already paid for, makes the most sense. I guess my issue with, 9 through 12 all the way out at East is, again, demographics. I think I understand there's concern about transportation in an 8-9 setting out at East, but to go through that for 2 years instead of a full 4 years or 3 years is a compromise, in my opinion, that is, something worth looking at. And it's that compromise. So, and again, just given the demographics and where the population is and is continuing to shift in the Wausau community and the district, knowing that that central location, obviously now, given the demographics and given where we're at, makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's also an argument I've heard from folks, frankly, that why aren't we going to use an 18-year-old school for a 10 through 12 instead of a 52-year-old school for a 10 through 12?
Yeah.
The theory being, right, it's more readily, I don't want to say accessible, maybe it's upgradable to do what we would want to do for high school.
Mm-hmm. I think I tried to answer that in a couple of slides moving forward. Can you go forward one, Jen?
Yeah, I think that question of which site is better for the senior high is a really interesting one with a lot of good points on both sides. I think the question of just a one high school 9 through 12 though is, I agree with John. I think even if we look at those estimates and we say that they're too big and that we could get away with half of that, which I don't know that we could, but let's say we said that's dreaming. We could do half of that at 50 million. I wouldn't feel comfortable going to the taxpayers and asking for a $50 million referendum when we have capacity already. I don't think it would pass, and if it did pass, I think it's something that would frankly hurt the district for the next 20 years as we work to pay that off and we can't do anything else. Even if we could get it passed, I don't think it would be good to get it passed.
I agree with that, and I think it's important to say these things out loud to everyone because we are somewhat committed to the buildings we already have. If we could go back, we would probably have done it differently, but it's all hindsight and Monday morning quarterbacking, and it doesn't really help to do that. And to having just passed this huge referendum, last fall, it would be, in my opinion, offensive to come back to the taxpayers and say, now we want you to pass an additional $100 million in order to build a 9 through 12, and we're not going to use some of the buildings that we've already asked you to pay for. I mean, it just is unfortunate, and everybody understands what the complications are, but that's the drawback. I think the east location, that what hasn't been brought up that's also problematic is west has such a better access to NTC, to UWSP Marathon campus, to Rasmussen, and all of those, next level education places that we partner with so much that I think is really critical for our high school students too, in addition to the demographic piece. So
when we talk about travel to east versus west, do you think it's an advantage or a disadvantage? I don't know how to say this. So if west was the senior high, it would be buses going to Wausau East versus if east was a senior high, it would be buses and student drivers going to Wausau East. I haven't given this much thought. Is one better than the other? I would imagine maybe the buses going the farther distance is better than individual student drivers, but I don't know if one is an advantage over the other. Maybe now's not a good time to talk about busing.
And I think that's really getting into some deep things. You could also get into the anecdotal analysis of the 9-12 versus the 10-12. There are a lot of blue ribbon schools of excellence that are 10, 11, 12, and their freshmen are in the middle schools. And there are a lot of blue ribbon schools of excellence that are 9 through 12. I mean, so it's pretty hard to say which is better. But going back to your comment, Karen, I think we need to keep on looking at where we're at, because we can't go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money. We've got buildings we have to work with. And I like the idea, let's learn from history, but let's not keep on talking about it. Something happened in 2004, a building was built. Now we have to work with that. And what's best for our students and families for the future is what we need to be focusing on.
Well, I would say we do have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money for all the elementary work that we pulled out of the referendum. So we already know that that's coming. We already know that we have to do that. So I don't see how we could add more to that.
To that point, Lance, I think the community would be more willing to participate in that if they saw that we were being smart with our facilities footprint, our layout, operational savings, and the educational, efficiencies and things that we're talking. I think they say, awesome, you did the hard work, and now we're willing to participate. And those can be kind of done in potentially stages, smaller referendums that are more palatable. Potentially it could be done in some different ways. Or
Right. So how many more slides do we have here?
Just a couple. So this was just some pros and cons here. Just exploring a little bit about a 9th grade schedule. I think most of you probably realize this, but there's very few elective options in that freshman year, and when they do have it's not advanced. So we could provide everything that a 9th grade student would need without much replication if we did not have 9th grade in the high school. So I think there'd be very few academic access benefits if they were a 9-12. Is there one more slide on that? This is just a review of the 8, 9, 10, 12, so you had it in the same presentation. I don't know if there's questions about this. Let me see what else comes. And then really that's If you go forward a couple of slides, Jen, so that's the vision of, scenario A. Next slide is that same slide you've seen before. This 8, 9, 10, 12 really achieves most, if not all, of our outcomes. We don't know about transportation. We don't know about the intangibles. High school has nothing to do with childcare, and we are not reducing the number of schools, but we are the school buildings, but we are reducing from 2 to 1 high school and all that comes with that. And I think the last slide then is that enough information to limit that option, to eliminate the 912? Or do you need more information?
Keith, before you said you were gonna come back to my question regarding the potential exit of people, wasn't that?
Oh, or was it about the building at East? The campus?
Just family leaving it.
Families leaving.
Yeah, you said you're gonna, some later slide, and that's fine, we can wait for another one. I just think it's important that we understand, I mean, in the private sector, you wouldn't take on a project without knowing how it could negatively impact your go-forward revenue. Somehow we have to quantify that and be ready to deal with it.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So let's say we put out a survey, and we ask people, if we do this, are you going to leave?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm opposed to this, I'm going to say yes, right? If I ask people what they want to keep, this is where I've been struggling a little bit, and they give us long lists of things. Some we can provide, some we do provide, some we can't. I'm not sure. I don't know if we can take out the intent to stop this by people who are opposed to it, and so is the information that we get, is it accurate? Does it really inform our decisions in a helpful way? That's where I'm struggling a little bit.
Well, if someone is going to go so far as to say, yes, I'm going to leave in an effort to stop it, I would assume that they have some reason to want to stop it. And maybe it is that they're really going to leave, or maybe it's one of other 50 other things.
Yeah.
But the point being, at least you get a perspective on the number / percentage of people that are at least considering it.
One of the things that I understand what you want to achieve from that, but one of the things we've learned in past surveys and throughout our community listening sessions is that, like when you say they want to stop it, what's the reason? It's not uncommon that reason is based on misinformation. Sometimes it's not, but and so that's the trouble with a survey saying vote for A or B. How do you get, and some of the committee members brought this up in some of our meetings, where how do you get the people taking the survey the 8 hours of education that took place at the committee meeting before we could even have reasonable discussions on the pros and cons? Like, how do you get survey takers to have that education so that they can actually give an informed opinion on the survey? I think that would be tricky. And then the other thing is that people are already leaving. It's already a problem. We're down 200 plus students a year while Everest is up 100 plus students a year. It's a problem already for us.
Mm-hmm. And it could get
worse.
That
doesn't mean it couldn't get worse. So I'm not saying that doesn't take away your question, but what I'm saying is it's already an issue for us, and so we're trying to obviously find some sort of change to improve, try to reverse that trend.
Good point. On both sides.
So we're going to do nothing to try to quantify that? And we don't have to answer it now. We got to think about it more, that's fine, but as I said, I would have a very, very difficult time supporting something without some direction or indication on what the potential negative downside could be.
We were talking about this, trying to look for a way to quantify. If we talked about, we can use 5 maps, which is a tool that we use to, identify the location of students in our district. And we thought, what if we, looked at the people who are around the edge of our district, right? In Hewitt, Texas, or Maine, or down in the, in the South Mountain, would they be more likely to leave? Possibly. It's hard to know the motivations, right? Sure. Why, what we know from people who have left, roughly half or more are based on their family situation. The other percentage are, they want more hands-on learning. They want more, specialized classroom support. They, things, childcare was obviously one of the main. So, and those are things that we're trying to positively impact through these changes. So while I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a temporary dip in or increase in the gap in our open enrollment trends, these efforts that we're talking about doing, they're the things that are going to bring people back.
Do you know, so can you think of a way to accurately quantify it, Pat? Because I agree with you if we can do it accurately. What I worry is you send that survey out, and let's say my child is going to a school that's 2 blocks away, and the merger's gonna make them go to a school that's now 2 miles away.
Right.
And so I want to vote no, and the way I do that is by saying I'm gonna leave, but are they really gonna go to a different district now because their school is now 2 miles away instead of 2 blocks? That's one of the main negatives that we hear from people. The school is within walking distance, now it's 2 miles away. Well, but the other district school is, 20 miles away.
Right, well, I mean, we lost 450 kids when we closed schools. They obviously found a way to get much further than that to other districts. So if we think that this is not going to have a negative impact, I think we're fooling ourselves. If we can't agree on a good way to quantify it, then so be it. I don't have, this isn't my proposal. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I've also thought about, when I'm asked the question about what happens if people leave, if families choose to leave, one luxury about school districts is we don't have to make a profit. It's a huge difference, from schools. If people chose to leave, but we're able to right size our district and consolidate our resources to improve the service and the performance of the students who are here, that's actually of more interest to me than the total number of students we serve. That's what's exciting to me here. I hear what you're saying, Pat. I don't have a good way to measure it.
No, I get it, but that's just, that goes exactly contrary to what we're talking about. Declining enrollment, declining revenue, all this other stuff. Now we're saying that declining enrollment may be okay. But we're doing this because it's not okay. Which is why, they're kind of fighting one another there, and the logic just doesn't pan out, at least for me yet, but we're early.
You bring up a tough question.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the water balloon theory. You squeeze the water balloon here, it goes over here. We're trying to take care of students that have left to help bring them back with the different offerings that we have. But there are going to be some people that are going to leave. Anytime there's big change, I don't know how to get that data for you either. I'm just thinking as you're making comments, but I'm thinking we're going to have some people that are going to be upset no matter which way we go. And that's going to be very difficult. It's difficult, for all of us to have anybody upset because we want to do what's right for everybody in our district, and we want to make sure that we're focused on that. But it's going to be tough, and I think that's where we have to leave it right now. It's truly a hypothetical that people are going to leave because we don't know that. People might see what we're doing and say, I like that. And then they talk among themselves and they start talking about the positives. So we need to stay focused on the positives here as we continue to move forward. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't be looking at, and if there is a way to get that type of data, we should be doing it.
Yeah. Let me talk to a few more folks and see if there's some ideas. Yeah.
One of the things that I think we're looking at, and these are the pieces that I think are going to drive some of this, are the intangibles. The decisions that we're going to make, we're going to try to make the best rational decision that we can, what's best for the students, what's best for the district, and everything. But the pieces that are going to oftentimes influence people's negativity are those emotional pieces. Once a lumberjack, always a lumberjack. Those pieces and some of the traditions that have been held. And if we are really sensitive to that and we know what those are, I think and once we have the plan, we can address and really work to address some of those things in a very positive way. If we ignore those, I think we're also going to have some major headaches.
Right. Does the board wish to further explore that 9-12 concept, I guess? Or do we work on the 8, 9, 10, 12 and continue to explore the K-8 options?
For me, I think it's either the 8, 9, 10, 12 or staying as we are now. I just don't think the one high school is realistic. I would need more information to decide which one I think is better, staying as we are now or going 8, 9, 10, 12. But I think those are the two choices.
Okay.
I agree, Lance. I think one high school, the amount that would take is just not feasible at this point in time, so I would agree.
There was a interesting proposal or idea. I think you got an email today about a freshman campus, ironically, and so we continue to get ideas from people, and we appreciate the creativity and really appreciate the fact that people are engaged in the conversation.
So that we can
That's
keep
all I've
on
got.
moving, I'm just gonna ask the question and then move on, hopefully. You were talking about, and it just all of a sudden slipped my mind what I was gonna say here. It's one of those senior moments, I guess. But bottom line is, I think we need to take a look at what your team has already done, looking at the 8, 9, and you said there were so many positive things that are coming out of that already, and then the 10, 11, 12. Maybe that is at the next time we get together. What are those positives, and what are the things that you're excited about for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so that we can see that and look at something tangible. We don't have the data to look at the 9, 10, 11, 12 to consider that right now. We just, with what we have, we know it's expensive. And we'd have to go to the community for another referendum. That's not going to happen. So let's take a look at the positives that you have so that we can build off of that. Because we need to take a step forward and identify some positive things here.
Mm-hmm.
To add to that, President Boucher, would it make sense to ask Nexus, like you did for the analysis of the 9 through 12? I saw some concerns with some capacity in a 10, 11, 12 situation. Would they have any, analysis that they could provide on what may or may not be needed in a 10, 11, 12 at West, so you could start to get an idea of whether or not through the consolidation, if it were to go through in the kind of the Plan A fashion, what referendum dollars would be picked up, that could be reappropriated to West and possibly be able to cover maybe some additional work that would be needed.
Gotcha. Yep. Thank you.
I would like to see that as well, and I'd like to see it compared to East. I know we've assumed that, well, because West has 110 more capacity, then it must be way cheaper to do it there. But I'd like to see,
For a 10-12,
yeah.
are we interested in a 10-12 at East?
I haven't ruled it out. I haven't seen any reason to rule it out yet.
Okay.
I haven't either.
Matter, right?
Yeah, that way, yeah. So if we back, is the mod schedule something we want to retain? How important is that for us to offer to our upper level high school students? Because that will be a determining factor.
I think it depends what campus they will be at.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now we just saw what that would look like if they were at East and the dollar amount that it would cost for that.
We can house 10-12 at West tightly, but we could house them at West.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think there's another decision, and that is the schedule. If it's a flex mod schedule we want, they got to be at West. Yeah.
Parking is the biggest concern at West.
Parking, yeah, we're short on parking, so we're working on a solution for that.
I think another concern that I would like to I know, Jim, you said we want to talk about the positives in the next meeting, but we got to talk about the negatives too. What would we lose? So if we house it at West, what do we lose? We lose autos. If we house it at East, what do we lose? Is there something at West that can't be moved over to East? Because I want to know.
Yeah.
I actually know a lot of the advantages already because we talk about them, because those are the fun things to talk about. But like, what do we lose if we have it at West, or if we have it at East?
Well, one of the things that because I found the autos piece when I learned, yeah, that's not moving if we house it at West. But then an alternative solution was that we would perhaps have like an autos academy that remains. So at least then every 8th and 9th grader would be exposed to autos, and then they would have an opportunity to decide if they want to now trend towards an autos academy and remain in the East building. And still every student then has access to that, track. Whereas, that was the only piece that made it feel like, oh, okay, because the whole reason we're looking at this is so that kids have exposure to all of these opportunities, and if we take them away from a building that now they can't have the exposure, well, then I think that would be something we would need to provide, that opportunity, which turns into, another scheduling situation that we're keeping 10 through 12th graders potentially with the 8th and 9th graders at East, a small cohort, I'm sure, but, those are all the details that I think are somewhat important, because like you said, Lance, I agree, we need to talk about what do we lose, what do we gain, what can we potentially avoid losing with ideas like that. So
As far as a schedule, I would look at what schedule drives better academic results. East report card was slightly better last year.
Yeah, you really can't. People want to look at
The report cards.
outcome results based on, we don't isolate factors here. We're not a laboratory. So you can't do a cause-effect experimental, this is attributed to this. The report cards vary year to year. It's not a schedule that drives achievement. It's the activities that happen with those kids and the teachers in the building. So I don't think we could isolate that impact.
So then what do we use to make the decision keeping the mod schedule or not? Just
Question.
personal preference?
Yeah.
well, are we the ones to make, I feel like that's the staff that really need to weigh in on that, which obviously the whole West staff is used to the mod schedule, the whole East staff is not. And I don't know so I would think that the West staff would be comfortable with keeping the mod schedule, and it would be the East staff that would need to decide whether that was a benefit or a drawback to them. And that's the feedback we would need to get, right? So if maintaining the mod schedule is important, it's really the East teachers that would have to be making the biggest changes.
I think, Lance, you brought up a good point, piggybacking on what Karen's talking about. We're not set which building is going to be the best building for 10, 11, 12. The autos plays a big part in there. The academy, these are the positive things that I was talking about. Let us hear what the positives are. Is an academy a possibility at East with that? If that's the case, then we need to see how it's going to work, and then we can go back to the scheduling, because again, remember, the schedule at East is not just basic 1 through 8, 1 through 9 schedule anymore like it once was years ago. They've been using block scheduling, which is another version of mod scheduling. And mod scheduling is just smaller mods to build into the bigger block. So the bottom line is it's not as far as it once was. Mark me if I'm wrong on that. Our dear principal from Wausau East High School, are we that off? It's not going to be a big change. So I'd like to hear about the academy, possibility of, like Lance is talking about, at East. Monetarily, would it be not feasible to do that? So keep it at West, 10, 11, 12? There's a lot of things you can bring back to us now. some positive things that you're doing with the 8-9. Bring back some of the ideas of what's going on for the academy opportunity with automotives. Then we can see something.
Can I ask one question about the mods I'm only familiar with mods, so that's because of my kids have all been on the west side. My question with the block scheduling on the east, which I don't have experience with, does it allow the same flexibility for youth apprenticeship type programming like West does, because you can have a lot more open mods allowing you to get off campus without such disruptive, missing big blocks of classroom time? Because I see that as an advantage to mod schedule, and maybe that advantage is available with the block east schedule. I'm totally unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, I mean, you basically would schedule it as like a work-based learning,
Okay.
right? So this block or these blocks could be scheduled, for youth apprenticeship or whatever that work-based learning component might be. I don't know, would you add more to that?
I would just say that, like, students get a work release hour, just like just like at West, they have work release mods set aside. East is the same way. A modified, Deb, you can jump in, but a modified block day where they run, 1, 3, 5, 7. Then a student that maybe has a 7th period work release, they actually have expanded hours on those days for work release. So a lot of times we see those kids will take advantage of a little longer class hour and schedule their time to work on those days. So it works. We also have students that will take their work release time during first period, and they'll actually go to work earlier in the morning and then show up at school a little later in the morning. So we see it go both ways at East as well.
Okay, great, thank you for that.
Right.
All right.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we can move on. All right, agenda item number 6, open enrollment seat availability. Wendy Carpenter will present the open enrollment space determinations for 2023 and 2024. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Wausau School Board. So I am here with the annual recommendation with Mr. Bushman on our open enrollment space determinations, information and recommendation. So Mr. Bushman will cover the regular education space availability, and then I will go through the special education space availability.
Just as we get started, some of the considerations that go into the limitation of open enrollment would include things like policy on class sizes that you have, factors regarding student-teacher ratios, what your building capacity is, what your projection for students in and out are. So there's various factors that go into making a consideration. Where we're at from a general ed perspective right now is we have no limit set for open enrollment. So if a student wants to enroll into the district, we will allow that. One caveat to it is that just because a non-resident member wants to enroll to, let's say, one of our elementary schools, it doesn't necessarily grant that they're going to be in that school. It may be a different school, only because we wouldn't displace a district student for an open enrolled student. But we've been able to accommodate any of our gen ed open enrolled students into the district.
All right, thank you. And then on to special education seat availability. We use a lot of the same criteria. For the 23-24 school year, we are recommending that there be 0 space available in all areas of special education programs, supports, and related services, just due to the struggles in finding staff and making sure that the needs of the students in our district are taken care of. So the final recommendation would be to approve the regular and special education non-resident spaces available under open enrollment for the 23-24 school year as presented.
I'm going to put it out there for the board to move on this. I'm seeking a motion to approve the regular and special education non-resident spaces available under open enrollment for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
I do have a question about the special ed one. Is that what our number was previously? Like last year, were we 0 open enroll as well, or is that new this year?
So last year, it's added to, so last year, a lot of our related services, OT, PT, deaf, hard of hearing, speech and language, anything that we've contracted for or we're struggling to meet the needs, we presented those as 0, and then this year we expanded that to all areas of special education services and supports.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the reality is we're funded at, what, 30%-ish?
Ish.
I mean, so any open enrolled special education student that we take in is by definition taking funds away from our current district students. I mean, it's insensitive to discuss it in terms of finances, but the state really needs to fix that. It should be funded at 100%. It's education that's required by law, and no district should be harmed because of the number of special ed students they have, and all those special ed students should get all of the education they deserve, and the way that happens is by funding it at 100%. Off my soapbox, sorry.
I sense that. And I don't think that's going to happen at 100%, but are there any other questions? Because Lance put it out there very well because of the fact that it does harm the students in our district who are already here. If not, we'll go to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we want to start here?
We have the special meetings next,
Correct.
before we go into closed session.
Correct. So we want to start here.
Yeah, we got it.
We'll do this whole meeting here.
We're going to keep on going with this, so I am calling the special meeting of December 19th, 2022 to order. At this point, we'll jump to agenda item number 2, pay rates, estimated time. I won't put that out on you. I was just kind of throwing that as a funny. It didn't go over very well. Tabitha, I turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's nice to be in front of you again today. To revisit from last week, I would reiterate my proposal that's on asking for approval has not been modified from the proposal that I brought forward to you last week. I know there was some discussion about potentially raising that rate. I did go back, I re-looked at all of the survey data. I collaborated with a number of my colleagues around the area. I do believe that $140 is an appropriate daily rate. It puts us a few dollars ahead of our most, our neighboring district, DC Everest, where we share the most staff members. So it definitely puts us ahead in that process. At the same time, I feel like if we go more than that, what we're doing is just continuing to increase that rate, but not necessarily increase the volume of people for those positions. And so what I'm trying to do is right size so that we're more competitive for the people that we already are sharing, perhaps also attract some new people, but not outprice us so much from our neighbors that it just causes all of them to raise their prices and we're escalating without necessarily a change in impact. So that kind of summarizes what I'm requesting in front of you. Ultimately, it's your decision what you would like to move forward with, but that's my recommendation. There was also a question last week about our top 3 most unfilled positions. I thought that was going to be super easy to run in terms of a report. The report that I was thinking of when I processed it comes out with 2 categories, regular ed and special ed. So that wasn't super helpful. I can tell you special education far and away is our number 1 absolute most unfilled job when requesting substitutes to fill in across all of our schools at all levels. To get a little further into that challenge of other positions that are hardest to fill, I actually did a non-scientific dipstick with our admin assistants who deal with this on a daily basis, particularly at our secondary schools, because those individuals are the ones who, when we have unfilled jobs, they're scrambling in the building to have our existing teachers fill in for those positions. And while they all said, depending upon the day, it could be any position, overwhelmingly, the next two categories that they said they struggle with are encore positions like music, art, phy ed, at elementary, the science area. They're specialty areas that not everybody feels comfortable with, and they don't necessarily feel that they can give students the same type of experience as they can if they're a licensed classroom teacher, so they're more comfortable going to a classroom. So that was one piece. The second area was world languages at the secondary level for sure. And again, it comes back to the feeling of being able to most adequately meet the students' needs in those classes. I think our teachers do a really nice job of trying to put plans together that anybody who can fill in for that class can execute on. However, it's just different. And so I think for those reasons is what I got back from feedback from the buildings. And short of taking I think it was 40-some page report and going line by line to identify what each of those positions were to quantify it, it was going to be a near impossible task. And it doesn't come out in a spreadsheet, it comes out in a PDF. So it would have been monumental additional work to get there. So that's all I have in terms of an update to respond to that question. And based on my further follow-up, I do feel that the request I put forward for the $140 a day is appropriate. I do also reiterate the second portion of the ask, which was an added $25 per day for each of our float subs, as an incentive for being ultra flexible to go everywhere that they're asked at any given moment on the morning of the assignment.
Questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you for doing that research. And it sounds like it's the specialized classes that have the harder time finding subs, which does make sense because it's a specialized teacher for that class.
Right. I agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What is the vacancy rate right now for subs?
We get that information in terms of a fill rate, and our fill rate is typically around 60 to 65% on any given day. It is slightly less than DC Everest, slightly less than Stevens Point, who do pay more than we do.
And what do you expect it to go up to now with this increase?
I would love to see it in the 70 to 80%. The idea of getting it much higher than that, given the lack of staff even willing to do those positions, is difficult. The highest percentage fill rates that we're seeing in the area overall in the region are around that 80% mark, which we do hit on some days, but overall it's more in that 60 to 65%.
Can you just remind us where we are today?
We're at $130 per day.
And Everest is where?
Is at $136.
Okay, and we're already, so we're losing people to Everest over $6.
They are choosing, if they have a choice between two jobs on that day, yes, the substitutes are telling us that straight out.
And we don't think, well, never mind. So basically, I mean, what I'm walking away with is that you have all the tools you need to maximize our fill rate at 140.
I believe I have all the tools that I have at my disposal to try to influence that at 140.
Okay.
If, special ed is one of the hardest positions for our teachers as well, and I imagine that having a low fill rate there even makes that job even harder, because now you're covering for open positions. And I said at the last meeting, I didn't expect a proposal on special ed at that meeting, and this is 6 days later. So I'm not saying that now, but I really think it's something we need to look into. that if we have such a low fill rate at special ed, and how much more stress that puts on our special ed teachers, that we need to look into doing something to increase that fill rate for that sub position for special ed.
I certainly think that that's fair.
Even as much as looking at, you'd have to run the numbers, but how often are we looking for a special ed substitute teacher? How much do we spend on that in a given year, and would it make sense for some sort of full-time sub that could float to special ed requirements? I'm sure you've thought about all those things, but.
That's usually the question I ask every year. Are we getting close to that? And we never have been yet because of benefits and everything else that we've never gotten close to that. But you can take over my annual question. Are we close enough yet to hire the
Well, that's the question I
full-time-
had was,
Yeah.
how much do we spend on substitute teaching in a given, I'm sure it fluctuates, but in a given year, and analyzing some of that data, but I don't expect you to answer how much we spend on it right now.
I don't have that number available right now, but no.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
I think you're also missing something here. And when it comes to subs are hard to find to begin with. Certification is almost an impossibility because special ed's being covered by non-special ed licensure by subs. Bottom line is with that, a lot of times it's relationship building. It's creating a relationship with a substitute teacher who enjoys going into the school, and they know they're going to be safe, and they know that they're going to get the help that they need. So you can talk about special ed and chemistry and world language and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's important for our building principals to make sure that they are creating relationships with our substitute teachers, because that's going to hold them versus $6 or $4 or whatever the case might be. I think 140 is reasonable. But I think I would go more into the relationship building. That is going to be very important to keep our subs here versus going somewhere else.
I have to imagine the organization and the prep and what is left for them by the classroom teacher who's out is a big deal as well. I mean, if I was deciding between two schools, it probably wouldn't be the $6. It'd be which one do I walk into with a plan set that I know exactly what I do today. Because if I walk into a room and there's nothing and I've got no support and I'm lost that day, I'm going somewhere else next day.
And Lance, you just hit it on the head, because if I don't get emails of the lesson plans the night before, I don't go. So I'm going to tell you, as a sub, I'm talking about that's very relationship building and preparation. If I have two people to choose from that I'll come in and sub for, I'm going to go to this person. So I think those are the types of things that we need to build with relationship building.
That relationship building starts at the minute they walk in the door and the way they're greeted, though. It's not just something that the principal is going to be in control of.
Oh, I made it a point to make sure that I went and talked to the substitutes. So I think principals can play a big part in that.
Yeah, it's multifaceted ultimately. I know Jennifer Holcomb, who's in the Human Resources Office and is the primary contact for all of our substitute staff, really works hard to work on building those relationships, meeting each of them individually as they're coming in, getting them onboarded, getting them connected, making sure that their payroll is correct every time, some of those things. And at the building, there's all of those factors. How they're greeted, how they're treated when they're there, are they acknowledged and honored and thanked? A number of those things as well, which we continue to work on. I think in most of our buildings, I think that's happening very, very well. Probably in all of our buildings to a degree. It just depends on what they're walking into on that day.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'm seeking a motion to approve a daily rate for substitute teachers of $140 per day and an additional $25 per day for float sub positions.
Second.
Any follow-up questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Abstain? Okay. One abstention and 8. Motion
you.
carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Agenda item number 3. Diana White will share the proposed 2023-2024 calendar. Take it off.
Good evening, board members. The calendar that I'm bringing you today is exactly the same as the calendar you saw last week during my presentation. What we are asking of you tonight is to approve the calendar that we're presenting. However, we would need that waiver from DPI granted that would allow us to start before September 1st. So we're just asking for approval so that we can go ahead and fill out the necessary paperwork and get the public hearing that is necessary scheduled. And of course, the approval would hinge on that waiver. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Wausau School District staff, as well as the parents who have reached out, providing feedback on how they would like to see the calendar look. I want them and I want you to know that this calendar that we're bringing to you today takes all of that feedback into consideration. So I'd like to thank them before you have discussion and vote.
All right, I'm going to put the motion on the table to begin with. I am seeking a motion to approve the 2023-2024 Wausau School District calendar as presented, pending DPI's approval of waiver to start before September 1st for construction purposes.
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
Can you tell me if this calendar has snow days built in?
Yes. Yes, it would allow for flexibility for those traditional snow days, because what we could do is the independent learning days, we could easily swap one of those out for a traditional snow day, and that would not affect minutes or anything that we see currently with the current calendar.
So then those independent learning days potentially are all built-in snow days then?
Potentially.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Request of modification in West High School referendum budget. Per board member's request, the board will be asked to consider an expansion of the Wausau West referendum budget.
I can start. Just so everybody, we do have, I think Sharon Gold and Steve Schonert. I see three on there, not sure who the third is. From Nexus to help, what's that?
You have Sharon and Steve.
Sharon and Steve, okay, thank you. This is a unusual process. We had a request from a school board member to expand the budget because of some design questions. So, Corey, do you want to go ahead and kind of share what you're thinking?
I'm the cause of this. Because of my questions I had regarding the school forest project, Superintendent Hiltz allowed me to sit in on, the West design meeting approximately 3 weeks ago, and I had to leave that meeting early. But as we went through that, we'll say the plans that were presented to the public on the referendum regarding the auditorium and front office areas. It included a community room in one version, and the version we had initially started talking about at that meeting, it was 1,666 square feet too big, which wasn't going to meet budget. So the architects, along with Sharon, made some modifications that get rid of the community room and cut that 666 off so it would meet referendum budget. Then I left the meeting, more or less, but I did ask and got the answer of how much the 1666 would cost if we left it. It was approximately $350,000 to $400,000 range. Okay, so I left the meeting, and then we had a meeting last Thursday, and unfortunately Bob and Dr. Hiltz weren't able to be there, but I'm so happy that Sharon is on the line so I don't miss the details. But between the two meetings, Dwayne with Somerville Architects resolved many of the issues that were brought up at that meeting 3 weeks ago. One of those being some modifications with the kitchen and how that affected seating in the commons, and making sure that our students had enough seating in the commons. my son had said, yeah, I didn't get to sit with my buddies the one day. And that's kind of what Principal Steckbar and I kind of came to a conclusion. Yeah, there's might be enough room in the commons for kids to physically sit, but they're not sitting by their buddies. So Dwayne found quite a few solutions, and one is there's a storage room more or less in the front corner of the commons now. It'd be the southeast corner, and that would get turned into a flex classroom, overflow seating for the commons. It works as a community room. It works for the cheer group. It could work for an outside group to come in and present things to the students, a small career fair area, all those kind of things. One of the other problems that exists at West is the 6 mobile bleacher units, and the equipment it takes to move those are in that room. So the very first plan, there was a storage addition built onto the east, again, the southeast corner of the field house, and Dwayne put that back. It gets the things out of the way for the indoor track meets. Students don't have to worry about running into them. Right now, the units block some of the doors at certain times, which isn't ideal either. It fixes a bunch of the problems. He fixed a bunch of the problems that were going on with kitchen area by moving only one locker room, kicking the coaches' rooms back and things. He was able to actually reduce the field house or commons area, original edition, by about 1,600 square feet. It would have, because he moved that over and put it on as storage on the field house. So as we went through that meeting, he had a design 2 and a design 3, and I had hoped that Dwayne was going to share design 4 that was going to merge all these things with the administration so that they would be able to see that, we could see that, and be able to discuss it with a visual reference. So I appreciate being able to discuss this and bring this up. I think Dwayne and the team has solved 95% of the problems, did a very good job of keeping it within the specified referendum budget, and with associate principal there, along with Principal Steckbar, I said if we added the 1,600 square feet more or less on the back and moved the other locker room and shifted the kitchen around, we'd gain another 120 seats within the commons, and that would fix pretty much all the issues. Plus, with the remodel of the ramp, the existing ramp, that's a ramp and half stairs right now, would become one ramp, and then some glass enclosure to kind of connect the school and hallways in with the commons area would enhance the views and the aesthetics of that space as well. So that's the 400,000 and the cherry on top kind of thing to really make it a awesome design from my perspective. And Sharon, please share and correct me if I messed anything up.
Yeah, I do have option 3. It's not in any prints or anything that I can share with you and just give you some level of visual. We did get good feedback from the high school staff. And I just wanted to emphasize too, I can share my screen. Okay, you can see the floor plan here?
Right.
We can.
Right. Excellent. So for option 3, that did check all the boxes that we are looking for, like Corey was suggesting. And one thing that's really important to just note with this option is it did have good feedback with the building, and it met the referendum criteria of what was asked in the question. So what Corey was talking about visually is this, I'll zoom in here, this room, what we're calling the community room, can be considered overflow seating. And I'm just gonna describe it, option 3 real quick. So overflow seating, but there's storage right here, so that is part of where this box comes from, is to relocate, like Corey was saying, the field house, bleachers, other items that are in the storage room, and things like that. But if you notice here, this kitchen comes all the way down. The kitchen's in peach. The kitchen comes all the way down to the ramp, which we would remodel. The food service support does allow, or did provide feedback that the longer kitchen layout is ideal. So that's where we were looking to keep the girls' locker rooms intact so we can help offset the budgets, the floor plans, things like that, as you see. So up here, this green floor plan area to the north, we have the cardio and weight room, which is part of the referendum that we're looking at, and we were able to get that 1660 square feet out of there, and it offset perfectly to this green box down below. So everyone's following along with what I'm saying? Make sense? So option 4, it's just preliminary laid out. This is what we call, essentially a bubble diagram. So we did get a very preliminary bubble diagram with no vetting, but based on what Corey's feedback was, is we did add the locker rooms, these blue spaces right here, added the locker rooms back up for an additional 1,600 square feet, that magic number here. And by freeing up, moving these locker rooms back out, the kitchen does shift back over, if you're following my mouse. Oops. Let me put that back. And then we could free up this area down here for additional seating. So between the two options, when all was said and done with more research that we've had so far, option C, we have 80 additional seating spaces, and option D would add the 80 additional spaces for overflow from the commons area and an additional 100, approximately, it's a little over 100 seats. And then we could really dress up this front entrance, build up this, front entrance to the commons, get some windows in here so there's really good visual across the hallway into the new school store, and have a ramp coming down that's really welcoming into the commons area for the students to come in. So if you can follow along to help Corey out with what he was saying with some visuals, this room being in the front of the space, front of the commons area, is really a fantastic location for a multi-purpose room, whether you're inside of the school or outside the community room after hours. It really seemed to solve a lot of problems. So with that, if you're following along with option 4, what we're asking for is another 1,600 square feet plus or minus. That's what we're betting out right now, with an additional 100 plus seats to the additional 80 to help plan for future expansion in the commons area. Does that make sense? And then that's where this also is coming in to help clean up the field house, give proper storage in. And so some of the additional square footage that we're requesting would go back into the storage to make it all net out. But now instead of, for option 3 that we're at, budget neutral, option 4 here, which I talked you through, would ask for another 1,600 square feet.
Yeah, and the reason I'm appreciative of me being on the group and going through this with staff and the West staff as well, and then why I'm asking for us to take a look at this today, is Sharon and the team they wanted the footprint. And if it's not easy to add on later, and they would like to, do the presentation and get us to the 50% presentation was scheduled for January 26th. And with this answered, whether it's a yes or a no, they can proceed. Otherwise, they're doing, all indications are they're right on budget with everything,
And I do want to build on what Corey's saying. The square footages that I'm talking about here is, we are working very hard to make sure this project comes in mindfully of the inflationary impacts that have been happening, this is a big project, so we want to make sure that we're thoughtful about moving forward. So these square footages are actually 10% less than what the referendum has, is a strategy to help make sure that this project in all its complexity comes in on budget on bid day.
What's the cost difference?
Between the two, well, the number that we would have is a little bit higher than what Corey would suggest. And we'd be comfortable with $450,000 for that additional 1,660 square feet.
And that's separate from the additional money if we want to make that extension over by the main entrance area to be buildable for a second floor.
Correct.
So all of this sounds really good. The concern I have is that you can do this on every project. We can go to every project and find a bunch of really good stuff if we just spend more. But then we run out. So that's my only concern. So my answer is similar to when the question was brought up about adding the additional funds for building or being able to build a second floor is, like, how do we know until we know what the final total is? Like, how much over do we think West is going to be when you bring us the 50%, or is it when you bring us the 90%? Like, when are you comfortable telling us what the total amount is likely to be and how much over it will be?
We will be providing a we do a detailed estimate on the 75% that we're presenting at the 95%. So, but the strategy I have listed with the 10%, a lot of percentages here, 10% square footage reduction on the new construction, which is the most expensive square footage that we're touching in the project, is a strategy to help make sure that we're meeting our budget on bid day. So we're being thoughtful about streamlining scope and efficiencies to make sure that we do the best scope deliverable based on the referendum, what the voters approved and the feedback that we're getting from the district and teachers, principal, et cetera. So there's a balancing act. So it's a challenge to give you a total budget right now, but we have really good strategies to make sure that we're getting there at the end. And we're transparent about it.
What is the current commons capacity?
See, we just have it tracked in net. So this option 3 nets an additional 80 seats, and option 4 nets an additional 190 seats. It's over 100. We just, we're still working through those details.
But we don't know our starting point?
No, what's the current capacity, Sharon?
I don't have that number on hand. I can get that to you, Keith.
Thank you.
Or Dr. Hill, I'm
Because
sorry.
considering it in totality with what we were just talking about, right, we know that there's no room in the commons right now. So whatever the existing capacity is, I would argue is too small. And when we start considering the increase in enrollment, if we do a 10-12 there.
Yeah, and Pat, you hit it. The other part I want to add, though, is Wes needs these things whether we change the structure or not. They are lacking. They're lacking. They need that flex room. Things in field house are messed up. They can't do the track meets and things as well, right? They got to move those seating out of the way to use the rock wall. There's a bunch of stuff that it needs to be fixed. So when we look at it, that's why I'm trying to paint it that way, that for this other 50 cents in 34 million, right, total, we can gain the capacity in the commons and make it way better. And then if we do move forward with some combination, right, then it's even better.
No, my only point is that is the additional capacity enough if we went down a path of 10 through 12? And the other question I have would be, if I'm asked to make a decision, are we going to spend $500,000 for footings that we may never need versus cutting off square footage now to meet a budget? I'm I'm gonna put my money today because that's what the taxpayers voted on. We should be doing everything we can to maximize and deliver the square footage that was put forth in the referendum.
Well, that gives Sharon and the team a different thing to think about.
Well, I just don't see the
Right.
point of cutting square footage now on something that we said we were gonna do to put in a $500,000 footing that we don't know if we're ever gonna need.
Well, the challenge with the footings is without providing the structure for future addition, like the future second and third floor, that's something that would be extremely difficult to go back and upgrade in the future. And as far as the commons area, and I don't want to compare one to the other because they're two separate items. So by doing the second and third floor, we're keeping the door open for the future work. As far as the expansion goes, that one's a little bit less, hard, fast, like a hard edge on, or a hard boundary on where that would be. So the challenge with this one is we do have a option 3 and actually option 2, which I don't want to talk about, or I'm not prepared to talk about in too much depth, is those do meet the original referendum boundaries for the scope of work in the budget, where option 4 allows us to plan for the future better. So that's where we're looking for direction on also what's the most important to be able to bring to the commons. Like, there's always a trade-off, right? And so we just want to make sure we're the most thoughtful in the direction, looking for your feedback on whether that trade-off at this time is the most acceptable way to spend, essentially additional money. Does that make sense?
No, and it's probably just me, but honestly, just hearing this verbally, and it's clear as mud. I have no idea what we're being asked to approve.
I'm asking it's the same, and we didn't really necessarily approve the 500,000 for the footings, we just kind of all head nodded, right? And
we're waiting for the 95% to come in with that included.
Yeah.
So we could make decisions, which is where I think Lance was going, like, this should be another inclusion or a consideration in that 95% approval that we have to.
Yeah, that's what I, like again, it all sounds really good. But it always sounds good when you add cost to the project. So we can do that at each of our projects. We can find lots of good stuff. But it's just hard to wrap my mind around it without seeing the 50% and then the 9. I know you don't want to come to us with a 95% and then have us change it, but this might be a project that needs to have a couple options that are more developed before we decide. And yes, that means spending thousands of dollars maybe on some preparation of those options, but that's probably worth it if we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference in the cost.
Well, and I'm confident. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I'm hearing is the one, you are working really hard to keep us on budget. 2, the architects did a really nice job solving a number of problems. There's likely to be an increased cost. How about we do the same thing we did with the foundations? Give us a thumbs up to design it. We will continue to work, with Nexus to get this thing on budget or within budget plus interest, right? That's because I hear what you're trying to future-proof everything, and it's great. And Corey, I really appreciate you're adding your insights to this. But I guess I would like to wait. Sharon, when's our next formal update to the board on West? Is it January 26th? And that's a 50%? Okay. How about if we give you till January 26th? Let's build in the foundations and this new option
Number
4,
four.
yeah.
And we'll bring that to you on the 26th at 50%, and we'll have a better understanding. You'll have more time to analyze it. We'll get time to get feedback from our staff. I'll get time to understand it, because frankly, I don't, because I just saw it this morning. So is that agreeable to the board?
I think that's great.
Beautiful.
Give us a
Let's do that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just to be clear, Corey, I don't disagree that all of that stuff is a great idea.
Yeah, I want to like beg forgiveness from staff because I hit Dr. Hiltz with this on Friday afternoon, or Friday morning. So this is, I appreciate all of this, and I wouldn't take the time, ask for the time if I didn't think it was like a really good idea.
Yeah.
I appreciate your trust in
I
me
like what
talking
you
about it.
suggested. I think to put it in a nutshell, what you suggest, Sharon, let's go with
Yeah.
that.
All right. Sharon, we'll touch base. What is today, Monday? Tomorrow. Right? And we'll talk more about
That
this, so.
sounds good.
Good, all
Yeah,
right.
we'll figure out a way to present it to you all in a thoughtful and more in-depth way
Yeah.
at the 50%.
Sounds
So-
great.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Steve.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, agenda number 5, I'm requesting for closed session pursuant to state statutes. We'll need a roll call vote on this. I'm seeking a motion to enter into closed session to discuss, approve administrators' contracts, evaluation and employment of superintendent of schools, and reconvene in open session to take further action if necessary and appropriate.
Second.
All in favor?
It's a roll call.
Oh, that's right.
Roll call
And
vote.
I even stated that. Yeah, thank you. I was moving it. Go ahead.
John Kreischer,
Yes.
Pat McKee,
Yes.
Cody Nicolai,
Yes.
Joanna Reyes,
Yes.
Corey Sillers,
Yes.
Lance Trollop,
Yes.
Karen Vandenberg,
Yes.
Lee Webster,
Yes.
Jim Boucher.
Yes.